So, full transparency before you start watching today's video, it was actually filmed on Tuesday during our live show at 5 p.m. Eastern each week, and afterwards the Browns signed Deontay Foreman. So, it does impact one part of the video a little bit when we talk about running backs, although I still think the Browns are in the mix to draft a running back. But just keep that in the back of your head as we talk about the running backs. This was filmed before I had knowledge of them signing Deontay Foreman. Coming up on today's show, we're going to run through some updated draft targets for the Browns after the first big wave of NFL free agency, where the Browns have essentially filled out most of their roster. They may make another small vet minimum signing, but I don't think you're going to see them spend big anywhere else. So we've got a pretty good idea as to what the Browns need to do in the draft to fill out the rest of their roster. Now, like last year, the Browns, in my eyes, bad time for hiccups, are going into the draft with not a whole lot of pressing needs, right? They don't need to get a certain guy to find a starter. Like, no one they're drafting, barring an injury, is going to be one of the 22 starters. So now they're kind of looking for depth pieces and just overall best player availables to kind of round out the roster. Now, before we look at any draft targets at these positions of need, make sure to subscribe to the channel because the NFL draft is the next big monster on the schedule, and I don't want you to miss a single thing when it comes to the Browns. I know not having a first-round pick is not the most exciting thing in the world, but that just means you got to dig a little bit deeper because we got to find these hidden gems without having a first-round pick just gifted to us. So without further ado, let's jump into it, starting with the running back. So I think this is probably the Browns' biggest need in the draft when talking about looking for guys that could make a real big impact week 1, week 2, week 3, compared to the other spots on the roster that they addressed a lot in free agency. Now, we're going to go off Mel Kiper's running back rankings and position rankings in general. This is just a starting point. This is definitely not the gospel by any means. Jonathan Brooks out of Texas is the number 1 running back. Jaylen Wright out of Tennessee at 2. Then Trey Benson, Blake Corum, and MarShawn Lloyd round out the top 5. Let's take a closer look at Jonathan Brooks, who I like a ton. Unfortunately for Brooks, he was stuck behind Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson, 2 Texas running backs who were drafted. So he never really got the opportunity to be the bell cow back until his final year in Austin, where he just went off. 1,100 yards, 10 touchdowns, 6.1 yards a carry. Unfortunately, he did suffer a torn ACL towards the end of that season. So there are some concerns about drafting a running back who comes off a torn ACL. But you shouldn't be too concerned as a Browns fan because what do you think happened to Nick Chubb at Georgia? To me, I look at Jonathan Brooks as if the Browns take him, this is more than just a complimentary back to Nick Chubb. This is a Nick Chubb replacement, right? This is we're going to let Chubb play out the rest of his year of his 2024 contract, and then we're going to turn it over to Jonathan Brooks, right? Jonathan Brooks is meant to be a first, second, and third down back. He can handle the workload. He's not one of the best running backs we've seen coming out of or coming into the NFL draft compared to recent drafts, but I don't think this is a pick you make if you don't have long-term belief that Jonathan Brooks is going to be your number 1 ball carrier. Now, as for the other guys on Mel Kiper's top 10 running back rankings, let's look at numbers 2 through 4. Jaylen Wright, Trey Benson, Blake Corum, and MarShawn Lloyd. You can look at their stats from last year. I don't think you should draft players based purely off their stats in college. That is very, amateur-y. Like, these guys play different schedules and different conferences with different rosters and everything around it. It's not going to translate over the NFL, so don't look at stats too much as a way to decide which player to take over another, but they do have some level of meaning. My pick of these 4 here, and I know this is going to come across as a homer pick, but I'm going to go with Jaylen Wright from my alma mater. 5'10", 210 pounds. He ran a 4.38 40-yard dash. I don't think he's going to go as early as Jonathan Brooks, so there's a chance the Browns could go get another player at pick 54 and circle back to Wright in round number 3, but he is a big play machine. Over 25% of his carries last year were for 10-plus yards. He is a home run waiting to happen. He's got not too much tread on his tires, but he also has enough experience where you can feel comfortable that he doesn't need a year or two just to learn the swing of things of playing the running back position in the NFL. I think Jaylen Wright would be a really good pick to go along with Jerome Ford and Nyheim Hines early in the season. So let me know if you think the Browns should go running back at pick 54. Enough of me blabbling on here. What do you guys think? Should Cleveland address running back with their first pick in the 2024 NFL Draft? Switching gears, let's talk about the linebackers now. JOK, Jordan Hicks, and Devin Bush are likely your 3 starting linebackers, as the Browns, outside of JOK, pretty much turned this room upside down compared to last year. Here are Mel Kiper's top 10 inside linebackers for this year's draft. Edgerrin Cooper out of Texas A&M is number 1. Junior Colson out of Michigan is number 2. Peyton Wilson from NC State, number 3. Jeremiah Trotter at 4 out of Clemson. And Cedric Gray out of UNC is number 5. So let's take a closer look at the top 2 guys here, Cooper and Colson. Because if we are looking for the Browns to draft a need pick based in 2024, I think linebacker would make the most sense at this spot. If we take a closer look at Colson's profile, he's 6'2", 238 pounds. He was the leader of the best defense in football last year, the team up north, and he is just a dominant run stopper. I don't think Junior Colson is going to be a linebacker that transcends the position and just completely takes over a team, but I think he is a reliable defensive player, kind of like Willie Gay I've seen tossed out there from the Kansas City Chiefs, of someone that you can rely on, count on, and is dependable to stop the run and not be a huge hazard in the middle of your defense. As for Edgerrin Cooper, he is 6'2", 230 pounds, very well-rounded. And I know Andrew Berry loves to find players that excel in one specific trait, as he puts it, a horse trait. But when I think about linebackers, I think about guys that need to do a little bit of everything at a very high level. Have to stop the run. Have to be good in coverage. Have to be able to pass rush, right? Those are the best linebackers right there. Edgerrin Cooper at Texas A&M did all 3 of those things. He is a playmaking linebacker. Whereas Junior Colson, he is more of a, I'm not going to get in trouble because I'm not going to put myself in a position to get in trouble. And that comes at a price of, I won't be a big playmaker. Whereas Cooper, he may make a mistake from time to time because he's trying to go for a big play. But I think Edgerrin Cooper would be a great addition to this Browns linebacker core that needs some youth injected into it and not just go off of one-year contracts year after year. Called me old-fashioned, but I love a defense with a solid middle linebacker, and then from there, you grow. I know that's not the way the NFL thinks anymore, but there's something about a good MLB baby. All right, let's talk about the wide receivers now. The Browns have Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy, Elijah Moore as their top 3 guys. What do they all have in common? Bueller? They traded for all 3 of those players. Specifically, Andrew Berry traded for all 3 of those players. The next 2 guys, Cedric Tillman, David Bell, players drafted by Andrew Berry. Are you noticing a trend here? Unless some really good wide receiver falls, I think Andrew Berry likes the wide receiver room the way it is because he handpicked them. He traded for all 3 guys. I don't really see a world where Andrew Berry goes, I know I just traded for all those guys. I extended Jerry Jeudy, but I want to go use my top pick on a same position player and take snaps away from one of the 3 wide receivers I traded for, or give this rookie no snaps at all because I want to see Cooper, Jeudy, and Moore stay on the field the whole game. I don't think wide receiver, like we once thought it was, is the shoe-in pick at 54. I think after trading for Jerry Jeudy, he probably feels like he's got a really good receiving room for 2024. And maybe if a late fall happens, like a Xavier Worthy or an A.D. Mitchell comes down to him and he just can't pass on that type of talent, he'll go wide receiver. But I don't think it's the number 1 position he is searching for in this draft anymore, like we probably thought a few weeks ago. Plus, it's worth noting, if history tells you anything, there's going to be a run of wide receivers before pick 54. Like, we've got a pattern here. In 2019, 4 wide receivers went before pick 54 in the draft. Following year, 11, down to 7, then to 12, down to 6. And what do you know? This wide receiver class is loaded, and we may see 7 guys, I've heard, go as early as round 1. Toss in 3 in the beginning stages of round 2, and all of a sudden the top 10, top 11 receivers are gone. I don't see Andrew Berry just forcing a wide receiver pick at that spot because that's what everyone thinks he's going to do. So when we look at the top 10 wide receivers in Mel Kiper's rankings, maybe if one of these guys is there, I think Malachi Corley has a really high ceiling and low floor. Like, he could be a late round 1, early round 2 player. He could be a round 3 player. But I've got a feeling that we're going to see almost all these names be gone by 54. And if that's the case, he's not just going to take the next best receiver on his big board for the sake of taking a wide receiver. I think he feels pretty confident with the wide receiver room he has. Now, if you twist my arm and say, Petey, pick one that could be available at 54 that you like a lot, I think Xavier Legette out of South Carolina is a guy worth watching. 1,200 yards and 7 touchdowns last year. He is 6'1", 221 pounds, 4'3", 940. Let that sink in for a moment. 6'1", 220 pounds, and he ran a sub 440. Like, just that combination of size and speed, they don't come around every single year. In fact, the comp tossed out has been DK Metcalf because he is the first wide receiver to be 220 plus pounds and run a sub 440. So for a guy that had very little work his first few years in Columbia, from 2019 to 2022, he had a total of 42 receptions. He is still learning the position. And the Browns don't have the greatest track record of developing wide receivers recently, like Cedric Tillman and David Bell. Still early on Tillman, but maybe Andrew Berry feels like this player in a room with Amari Cooper and Jerry Jeudy and Elijah Moore, some more experienced players, can learn a ton from them. And if they move on from Cooper after this year, they've got his replacement from this last year's draft. So Xavier Legette would be my one guy to watch for at pick 54. But my gut's telling me they're not going wide receiver in round 2 anymore. We're going to look at some other draft targets in just a second here, but the deal continues on Fanatics where you can get this Browns USA themed t-shirt practically for free. I know I'm probably not supposed to say that, but it's $13, $14. So if you're looking to get some new Browns gear into your closet and you want to have an awesome Browns t-shirt to wear for a bunch of the barbecues, lake parties, and beach houses you're going to this spring and summer, go to chatsports.com/BrownsUSA. I put that link in the comments and description of today's video. Moving on here, let's talk about the defensive line. We'll kind of lump a little bit of edge rusher and defensive tackle together at this spot. I think they're pretty set at edge rusher. Will they add one in the draft? Sure, maybe. Will they prioritize it? After re-signing Zadarius Smith, signing Okoronkwo last offseason, drafting Alex Wright and Isaiah McGuire the last 2 years, I don't think it's going to be priority number 1 for them with their first pick in the draft. Defensive tackles in a similar spot where they brought back Shelby Harris, Maurice Hurst. They signed Quentin Jefferson. They draft Siaka Ika last year. They probably feel like they've got a really good defensive tackle room. But if someone falls to them that they just can't pass on, I could see defensive tackle moving up the draft board easier than defensive end because all those guys are living off of 1-year contracts. Here's Mel Kiper's defensive tackle rankings. I'm a little surprised to see Jerzon Johnny Newton so low at number 5 out of Illinois. Byron Murphy, Tavondre Sweat, Braden Fisk, Chris Jenkins. Of those top 4 guys, I think 1, maybe 2 goes in round 1, but it's not the best defensive tackle draft we have seen. I think you might see Berry target this spot more in early day 3 of the draft, which he is more known for doing compared to using a second-round pick on a defensive tackle. The one guy, though, that if he truly falls to pick 54, I'd be very happy to select would be Jerzon Newton. He was the best interior defensive lineman in FBS last year, 9 tackles for loss and 7.5 sacks for the Fighting Illini. A little bit on the smaller side, but that's kind of how Andrew Berry likes him. 6'2", 295 pounds. He combined, like I said, for 103 pressures from 2022 to 2023 which was the most by any interior defensive lineman. So we saw how much Christian Wilkins got in free agency this past free agent. How much Christian Wilkins got in free agency last week, if I could speak English. The Browns were in on Wilkins. Jazon Newton, I'm not going to say he's the next Christian Wilkins, but if you're looking for a defensive tackle that's got some pass rush upside, he's your man. And that's someone the Browns were interested in, at least resume-wise, with Christian Wilkins. So maybe they turn to the draft to satisfy that itch they have. So who do you want to pick at 54? What name do you want to hear Roger Goodell read in Detroit on the second day of the 2024 NFL Draft? My dream, I'm not changing it. I'm going with Edgerrin Cooper for two big reasons. The first one is I think he's awesome. I think he kicks ass and he takes names, and he's one hell of a linebacker that can get after the quarterback. 8 sacks shows that. He can stop the run. He can help out in coverage. And the second reason is you need help at linebacker. Devin Bush is not good. Maybe Jim Schwartz and Mike Vrabel can fix him, but if they can't, I would feel a lot more comfortable if Edgerrin Cooper was on this team as a backup and maybe took over from him halfway through the season. So Edgerrin Cooper out of A&M is my dream pick at 54 for Cleveland. Off-season mode, let's pick a card. We got Trizzy Trace on the 1s and 2s. What's going on, Trizzy Trace?
Having a good day, and I'm feeling really lucky. So I'm going to roll with the Jack of Clubs.
Jack of Clubs. Go 10 of Diamonds.
I like it.
Here we go. 2 of Clubs.
Oh.
2 of Clubs. All right. That will do it for us on this edition of the Cleveland Browns Report. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I really appreciate everyone who takes time out of their day to come hang out with us here on the channel. We will sign off and see you guys later.